Resistance can be anything. If you do a little bit of something to treat the other as your neighbor, to lead with love, even when you're feeling afraid, to build relationship and connection, you are resisting fascism.
Unitarian Universalists are a relatively small faith movement, and we live mostly in North America. We have frequently been overrepresented in social justice movements of things like voting rights, of things like abolition, of women's rights, of queer rights. And this has always been a very foundational part of our faith that each and every person is whole and holy, and that we are all connected to each other and responsible for one another. Trans folks in the United States right now meet the definition of internally displaced people by the UN. And so that is a big piece of why we are partnering with communities that are trying to protect trans and gender expansive people at this time.
UUSC was founded during the rise of Nazi Germany. Minister and his wife were sent to Europe to support folks getting out of Nazi Germany, getting away. And so there was always a clear sense in our faith that harm reduction and making sure folks survive these upswells of authoritarianism is one of the best ways to also resist them, right? Not let them continue to do that harm.
So that is sort of our DNA, our roots. And ever since then, we have been partnering with marginalized communities who are being targeted based on their identity or just because they're standing in opposition to an authoritarian force.
Tying back to that, authoritarian actors have strategically leveraged, oftentimes, claims of religious freedom to curtail the rights and freedoms of targeted groups. You guys seem to be doing the opposite, but also on religious grounds. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
A few years ago, we voted upon making a religious statement that trans and gender expansive people are whole and holy, and their presence in our communities is vital to who we are as Unitarian Universalists. And we did that knowing the authoritarians were gaining power, and we saw Project 2025, all of this stuff. So we wanted to be ready, essentially, to take these things to court on a religious freedom basis, that these laws and executive orders are, in fact, trampling upon our own religious freedoms.
On a few instances, you have mentioned your work with the Pink Haven Coalition, and I'm wondering if you can share more about the coalition and its work overall.
Yeah, so the Pink Haven Coalition was started by trans folks who were gathering up like-minded individuals, and they approached UUSC and the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and offered, like, this is what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build. We're trying to build small networks to move people to safety. And might Unitarian Universalist congregations want to be a part of this work? And of course we did. And really we've been closely working with them ever since, and along with our UU congregations, on providing tangible support where it is needed and in the ways that it's needed for individuals and families to be able to find some safety.
So the Pink Haven Coalition created this network, and it's very reminiscent of mutual aid. We were wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what it looks like in terms of the network.
Yeah, for security will be a little vague. It is very much based in mutual aid and learning from the ways we've supported migrants, especially through the sanctuary movement and in supporting sponsoring migrants that otherwise wouldn't be able to survive. The biggest piece, and the piece that Laura and I are most involved in, is supporting congregations and interfaith groups and groups with people of no faith that come together in particular safer places to build what we call welcoming villages. And so those groups are looking and building themselves as mutual aid, and they'll offer things like supportive housing, supporting them in understanding the systems of the state they're in and how to get residency, to get to the point where they can get a driver's license, they can get health insurance, all of that, supporting them in making sure they can eat, right? So that when folks sort of land, they're not having to do all that day to day as well. Because what we also know is that these folks are incredibly resilient. They got themselves out. We supported it, but they got themselves out. When there's some sense of safety, often that's where the trauma kind of comes crashing down. And so if you can support daily needs, you can support that and have folks checking in on people, saying, how are you doing? Want to grab some coffee? Can I help you get appointments set up? Or any of those things can just be the difference between someone arriving and having to go back to an unsafe place because they just can't kind of manage being in a new place, or honestly being unhoused or having severe mental health crises. Sometimes it still happens, but we reduce the harm of those moments.
And a lot of the folks that we're helping support also have intersecting things in their lives too. They're trans, that might be the primary reason they're trying to get to a different place. And often they also have a disability, or they are neurodivergent in some way, or they just need a little bit of extra support and have been dismissed, disregarded, harmed through state violence in a variety of ways, be that actual violence or bureaucratic violence of a state that does nothing to support you in any way.
You have spoken to how the current environment and the targeting of trans people did not emerge in a vacuum, but rather amid escalating rhetoric and state laws that were increasingly targeting the trans community. I'm wondering if there was a specific event that sparked the idea for the Pink Haven Coalition.
But I think it was a lot of little things. The founding organizers have a deep, deep experience in organizing, both with indigenous communities, with queer communities. And if you look at the success of the Christian nationalist movement, it's because they keep chipping away. Right now, the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, they are proposing to add a warning label to all TV shows that have trans characters or that have any kind of gender conversation in them. And they're framing it as parents should be able to protect their kids and all of these, but they're not saying how it equates trans people to violence and explicit content. Those are the only two other things that get warning labels. And it's just another one of those chips. If we can erase trans people from public life, it's a lot easier to get rid of them, right? Or scapegoat them, because we're not seeing the humanity in them everywhere. It's really easy to trigger fear in parents and people who have children that they love in their lives. And so they use that. And so you have to watch for those little steps and not let yourself be the frog in boiling water.
I'm wondering if you can also speak to what the culture of the coalition looks like from the inside and what sustains the people who are doing this work.
The way we treat each other as we organize reflects how we are going to treat the folks we're supporting. You know, when we come together and we're talking, it's just so joyful and life affirming, even when we're talking about really difficult things happening, right? We are not alone. We can have conflict and disagreement in probably the best ways I've ever seen it happen. It's just we hold each other as fully human and with love at all times. And I think that builds a strong network. It protects us from attack, and it makes sure that we're doing the work that we're doing with integrity and with care.
A lot of the transformation that I've seen has been among the volunteers in our congregations and in our communities who have a chance to do something really tangible right now. And I think for some folks who are feeling things like despair and hopelessness in this moment, as they're just kind of like in their little bubbles reading the news, and it's just this never ceasing crashing waves of bad, being able to get out in the community and actually be in relationship and be proximate with the folks that are being targeted right now.
We know that big tent coalitions are seen as essential to countering authoritarianism and to protecting marginalized communities, but often it is easier said than done. So what recommendations do you have for when difficulties arise?
Often the big tent piece, where I think it goes wrong, is trying to get everyone to be in one organization and one structure instead of a coalition of coalitions. So we are really clear about what we do right? We support folks in getting from less safe states to safer states and to make that as successful as possible. And then we're in relationship with groups that do other pieces of the work.
You've mentioned how programs like this have actually brought into it people that generally wouldn't have showed up before. We were wondering as well if there's been any on-ramps that have been created to bringing people that generally hadn't showed up before.
Folks don't always think that they can be social justice people if they're not willing to go to a protest or they're not willing to get arrested. And a lot of privileged folks, we feel risk a lot more keenly when we're actually the most insulated from it because we don't have the practice. So the on-ramps are things like being part of a Signal chat group with someone, just checking on them and making sure they're fed, or donating, right? Donate to help someone transfer privilege in the right direction.
What advice would you have for other organizations who are interested in doing this work and supporting trans folks right now, or other groups who are being scapegoated as well?
I'd also say for those of us who aren't, again, I'm gender expansive, but I'm not trans. I don't experience the world in the ways that the communities that we're supporting do. And so we need to be led by those folks because it is so easy for us who haven't experienced that to come in thinking we know how to solve the problem. And we can do it with the best of intentions and it's not gonna end well.
And for organizations that are coming to this from a faith perspective specifically, is there a particular guidance that you would offer them?
Going down to the core of what your faith says, and hopefully that is saying something along the lines of God is love, and that we can express that love in the world through loving each other. And knowing that loving someone and caring for them doesn't mean you need to understand or agree with them. Another example that we have in our work with asylum seekers and migrants is we do a lot of work with Catholic organizations. And from a religious standpoint, Unitarian Universalists values and Catholic values don't agree on many big societal issues right now, but we agree on migrants should be welcomed and cared for. So we can work together on that. And I think in coalition building, that can be really important too. Like, know what you can work with and start with relationship there, because that can lead to other things down the road.
Yeah, I was thinking about the example of how we work with a lot of Catholic groups in migration. And it's really important for us to be in there because there are queer asylum seekers and migrants. And having a group in the coalition that is better versed and better prepared to welcome and love those folks and to support the folks that maybe don't have that in their faith tradition as much, that's meaningful.
I want to give an opportunity for any final thoughts that you might wish to share, and I will hand it back to both of you.
I think going back to what Heather said earlier about there is a place for everyone in the revolution, and that the revolution can be one based in hope and joy, even as we contend with some of the hardest stuff that humans have created for each other. If you want to be a part of this, there is a place for you. Your gifts are needed.
Resistance can be anything. So often we're feeling like we can't resist this because, again, we have a picture of what resistance looks like. But what we should really ask ourselves is what is fascism asking of us? It wants us to be afraid. It wants us to be disconnected. It wants us to treat other people as others. So every day, if you do a little bit of something to treat the other as your neighbor, to lead with love, even when you're feeling afraid, to build relationship and connection, you are resisting fascism. Start with your day-to-day and let's create a little heaven together.